Hey, welcome back to Revival on the Air today. We've had a bit of a break over the last few months, but we've got some great episodes coming up for you in the coming weeks, so stay tuned. This episode is from when I recently interviewed two ladies, Jenny and Chris from Adelaide, who are great friends who've both had some pretty amazing things happen in their lives. I've split the interview over 2 episodes, and in this episode we hear mostly from Jenny, and boy does she have some things to talk about, including being miraculously healed from a stroke before the doctor's very eyes, of being healed instantly of grief that had plagued her for 15 years, and of her husband surviving and recovering from when his plane crashed at 380 kilometres per hour. My name is Ben Campbell, and this is Revival on the Air today. Chris and Jenny, welcome to Revival on the Air today.
Thank you, Ben.
I think this might be the first podcast I've done with 2 people who are not a married couple.
Could be interesting.
But you're a bit of a duo, though, the two of you, aren't you? You sort of hunt in packs, don't you?
We do. We've noted for that.
So we're going to try and grab both of your testimonies because you've both got some pretty amazing miracles that have happened to you or people close to you since you've been following God. So, Jenny, we might start with you first. Where did your journey with God first start?
Well, my sister belonged to the Revival Fellowship, and but I sort of wasn't listening to her. My mother died when I was 18, and I dragged my children to every church, and I wanted to know answers about death. But no one could tell me where you go, what happens when you die. It got to the stage where I was obsessed with it, and this went on for 15 years.
Wow.
And then Sue, my sister, who was in the Revival Fellowship, said to me, she's got cancer and that she's only got 3 months to live. And I thought, well, now, God, what are you doing now? You took my mother and now you're taking my sister. What are you going to do? And I'd sort of love God 1 minute because he gives me children when I had them. And then I hated him because he took my family. But anyway, I sort of started looking at the church because they speak in tongues, and that was something strange I hadn't seen from other churches. And I thought, I might just go and see what this is about. But before I did that, I went to Sue's place, the one who had cancer, and there was a gentleman sitting there, and of course, naturally, the Lord came up. And I said to him, will you tell me, if you know everything about God, where it says in the Bible where you go when you die? And he opened the Bible up in front of me. In Thessalonians, it tells you about where you go. You fall asleep. When you die, your body might disappear, but your spirit goes to sleep. And then one day you will meet the Lord in the air if you're spirit-filled. And that blew me away, absolutely blew me away. So for 6 weeks, I sort of hummed and hawed, but it never left my mind. And then I thought, right, Sue said to me, Jenny, I would happy to die knowing if you came to the Lord. And so that really struck me hard. I thought, she's happy to die, and why is that, So I came to a meeting and got fully baptised straight away. And instantly that grief I had for 15 years about my mother left me.
Instantly?
Instantly, wow. Just instantly, in the baptism tank. And I knew something had happened because I never thought of my mother I thought of her every day of my life for 15 years, and yet I never thought of Mum. And all of a sudden, I felt really different. Something had happened. And then a week later, I went to the meeting, and they have a prayer line, and I went out to the prayer line, and the brothers laid hands on me, like it says in Mark 16, to lay hands on them. And I did that, and I received the Holy Spirit, and it changed my whole life. Just amazing.
And how long ago was that?
That was 28 years ago. Yeah, okay. My sister, I keep forgetting to say, but she was healed of that lymphatic cancer.
Oh, wow.
No signs of cancer ever since, 28 years ago.
Wow, that's amazing.
Amazing.
So you've seen a lot of pretty amazing things over your 28 years.
I have.
Can you share a couple of those with us?
Yes, well, my husband, who was an atheist, and he didn't believe in God, but he saw the change in me and my children. And Anyway.
So what was the change? What did he see?
Well, my children were giving me, one particular son was giving me a hard time at home, and he would actually throw tantrums. He'd run away from home before Peter would come home from work, and he was disturbing all the children, the other 3 children. And when I came to the Lord in the February, and they have a kids camp, and James would love action. He loves games and everything like that. So I said, look, this camp has games and everything like that. You could enjoy that. And James wouldn't stay 2 minutes at anything. And when I dropped him off, I said, Lord, I don't want him back. It was peace that reigned at home without him. But what had happened was God didn't bring him back, because he was filled with the Holy Spirit at camp and spoke in tongues, got baptised and changed the whole household. This one son changed the whole household. It was just amazing. That was the first bit, first miracle. Well, second, because the Lord healed me from the stroke, from the pain in my mother. So, so then Peter, my husband, was a crop duster. And
so for those that don't know what a crop duster is...
That is a person that flies aeroplanes and sprays crops with chemicals. And we were living at Queensland at the time, and it's a pretty
dangerous thing, right? Because you're flying low and you're flying.
Oh, you hit power lines.
Moving a lot.
You hit tops of trees.
Yeah.
And if you go out to those properties, you can see how they go so low. You think they're going to crash. Yeah. You think, but this particular day there was a job his boss gave him, which Peter hadn't flown on it before, and there was a power line through it, and his wheel clipped it, and he was going 380 kilometres an hour, went straight into the ground, pushed his face into his brain.
380 kilometres an hour,
yep.
Straight to the ground.
Amazing. Pushed his face into his brain, broke his arm, his leg. So when Peter had the plane crash, I was in a meeting in Toowoomba when the phone call comes to say that he's been rushed to the Brisbane hospital. Anyway, we went to the hospital, and they said to me that he will only have 10% chance of living, but if he does live, he will be a vegetable. I don't want anyone that has to be totally dependent on me, because I've already had that with a relative, and no, Lord, you heal him totally or you take him. And that's exactly what the Lord did. He healed him totally. No brain damage. They said he had brain damage, his leg went black and the pulse in his leg went black, so they're going to amputate the leg. Mm-hmm. But on the table it came pink back, and the pulse came, and they saved it. Redid his face with 300 screws, titanium plates.
So imagine at this point you were praying.
Oh, constantly.
A lot.
Constantly. I was at the prayer line every time something he needed for his body. Like when they were going to redo his face, they wait till the swelling goes down before they redo the face.
So what do you mean by redo the face?
Well, because he pushed his face into his brain,
right.
He had no face, really. So
what is that, because of the bones were broken in his face?
Oh, everything. Yeah, the bones were totally crushed. His chin actually was hanging by a thread, so,
yep.
They just sewed that on. But I'd go out to the prayer line and say, Lord, I don't want to be kissing a man if it doesn't look like my husband. So you've got to have to make the surgeons do the right thing. Bring him back to how he was, and he did. It was just amazing. So they rebuilt his face with 300 screws and titanium plates, and he looks identical, just amazing. Rebuilt his leg. He had 2 big holes in his leg, and they put rods through it and everything, and these 2 big holes, for the first month of his being home, they have a nurse come round to open up these holes in the plaster and bath them, and then they'd shut it back up. They did that for a month, and they said, look, he's going to need skin grafts when the plaster comes off. 9 months later, the plaster comes off, and it was totally healed. My husband actually at that time asked me to pray and lay hands on him, which I did, and he just thought I need something. He was in so much pain. And then 9 months later, the plaster comes off, and the doctors were saying this can't be him because he's got to have skin grafts. But the Lord healed them, and he's got the scars there to show today. Amazing miracle. Just even came to the investigation of everything. He had a.
So this is the investigation of the accident.
Yep. Yeah. Well, what happened when Peter had the plane crash, he had crashed and made headlines because the ambulance and the fire brigades went there straight away, but no one would touch him because they didn't know the chemicals that were there.
Oh, the chemicals that he was
That he
carrying
was
on the
spraying,
plane, yeah, right.
And so no one would touch him. And it wasn't until the owner of the property came home to say, look, it's just like petrol, get him out. And so this made big headlines, you know. So then when it came to the investigation of the accident, he had the seatbelt on him in the plane when flying. Well, that came off during the accident, and if he had kept it on, the dashboard would have hit him in the head and he would have been killed instantly. But with the seatbelt coming off, he slumped in the chair and it hit his face. So the Lord, you know, totally delivered him from that because, you know, he's alive today, still flies aeroplanes today. Just amazing miracle.
So you're saying that post-accident that they were trying to replicate the seatbelt coming off?
Oh, definitely. And the seatbelt worked perfectly every time. It couldn't come undone, and yet it did come undone in the accident. So amazing.
And he's still here today?
Oh, yes.
And how long ago was that?
That was, I reckon, 16 years ago.
Yeah, right. Wow.
Yeah, still flies, yeah.
And you've got a pretty amazing testimony yourself.
I do. Yeah, well, in 2012 I had a mitral valve. I was born with a mitral valve. It was a problem.
What's that?
That's a valve in my heart that was not right. It wasn't pumping right. And I had to be looked after, you know, every 2 years with it. But then I had 4 children and a family and a business, and then I never go to the doctors because I think I'm fine and God's looking after me. But it came to a point where I had to have some other things looked at, and he said, you've got a mitral valve, we better check that heart again. When they checked it, my heart was 3 times the size it was. The valve had stopped working, so I needed emergency heart surgery. But my daughter was having her baby, and I said, can we hold off a bit? And he said, well, not really. I said, well, I have to be there for the baby. But he said, well, it'll take 2 months to go through the test anyway. So he said, but you've probably been living like this for 6 months, so we can hold that off, you know. So in 2012, February the 7th, I went under and had the repair on my valve. But I also had the worst case of arrhythmia in your heart. So I can remember as a little child walking along, hitting my heart, it's not working, and just hit my chest, and this would happen all the time. Really? So the doctor said it was the worst case he'd seen. So while they had my heart in their hands, they shocked my heart into rhythm to get it into rhythm. But what they did, they shocked it 20 times. And how I know that was my doctor, who's 75, read out the report and said, they should never have done it 20 times. They're only allowed to do it about 3 times. And what they did, they cooled the bottom part of my heart. So I've got no electrolytes in my bottom of my heart. It's completely dead. Well, I was stumping them because I wasn't in there for a heart replacement. But they didn't know what to do with me. I was only 1 beat per minute, 10 beats per minute. And they were, you know, really stumped. But you know the best thing about it, Ben? I was so sick. I was only struggling to breathe, and that's all I could think was to breathe. Was there? I knew the people, my family in the Lord, they were praying for me. And knowing that those people are praying for me, when you can't pray, you know other people are doing that for you. And the power of prayer is amazing. And I knew that. And I had saints coming in to pray. And Chris, my friend, she was coming in. She was seeing me getting worse all the time. And it was just amazing until they said, right, we're going to make a new pacemaker for you, and it's going to go from the top of your heart to the bottom of your heart, and then it'll make it beat as one. Even though your bottom of your heart will never repair, but it'll beat as one. And so when you have heart surgery, you go on blood thinners, and so they took me off the blood thinners to have this pacemaker put in. And of course I'd been in intensive care for so long. And then then they put me back into a normal room. And on the day, this particular Saturday, our church was having a prayer and fast. That's where people pray and they don't eat. And the Bible talks about it and how it's very, miracles can happen in that time, which this particular day it did. And my daughter came and saw me have the stroke, and she cried out to the nurse.
Hang on, the stroke.
Oh, sorry. So I wasn't feeling well in the morning, and Lisa came in.
So you're still in hospital at this point?
I'm still in hospital, yeah. they'd brought me up from the ward from having the pacemaker put in, and then the next day I was feeling awful, and my daughter came in and saw me, I looked awful, and she could see me having a stroke. But I went unconscious.
And what did she see? Like, what were the?
Well, she
what were the
saw
symptoms?
my side drop. My hands, my left side wasn't moving.
Yeah.
Everything was dropping on my left side.
So the classical stroke symptoms. Yeah.
But where this blood clot was, I'd lost both eyesight. So it was right in the middle of my brain, or wherever it was. I was getting affected by both sides, but mainly my left. And so I went unconscious and woke up in the CT scan. But in the meantime, Lisa had rang our pastor at the time at the meeting for them to all pray for me to be healed. So I woke up in the CT scan. They told me that you're going to have an operation on your brain, and 15 minutes later.
So what did you think then? Because so did you know that you were having a stroke, or was that?
No. I woke up and found I was under a CT scan, and they said to me, "Mrs. Duck, you've had a stroke."
Wow.
Well, I was blind in both eyes.
You couldn't see.
Couldn't see anything. So, but my left side, I couldn't feel a thing. They lifted me on there.
Wow.
And so, yeah,
So what did you think then when they?
Well, I just thought, God, no, I can't have brain surgery. I'm in here for heart, not brain. Although I suppose some people would think I need brain surgery. But anyway, so I was in there for, so they said, we're going to put you around in the ward, wait 50 minutes and take you back under the screen and see where it's settled. Then we're going to operate on your brain. And all I could think was, no, Lord, I can't do that.
And so at this time we were praying as a fellowship.
Yes, there was about 300 of us at Woodcroft praying, and word come through.
I actually remember that.
And Pastor Paul got out the front and said, right, we need to pray
right now.
Automatically right now for Jenny.
Yeah, it was just, I was just thinking, Lord, all I can do is just lean on you because I've got nothing else, And you can pray in the Holy Spirit with your brain, with your mouth shut, and I was just thinking that I could pray in the Holy Spirit, but, I was scared. I didn't know what was happening. I had no family member there with me, but I knew that the Lord was with me. So 50 minutes later, they put me under the scan again, and the doctors are behind the screen. And the doctor has been a stroke doctor for 40 years and he's never seen it before, but in front of their eyes, the blood clot burst into smithereens. Instantly, my eyesight came back, everything came back. Well, they didn't know what to do with me because they were scared of me. So they put me back in intensive care.
So what do you mean they were scared? They just...
Well, they've never seen anything like that before. That, you can't have a stroke and have all these symptoms and have that for the whole, 50 minutes I'm there. And they hadn't given, when you have a stroke, apparently they can give you drugs to stop that as soon as they find, well, they gave me nothing. I had nothing. So the Lord had done it all, So instantly I got everything back. And then they thought, well, she might have another stroke. We'll put her back in intensive care. But, of course, it was like God turned me on. As soon as we put me back into intensive care, I knew God had done it. I knew God had done a miracle. And so I told everybody, and it was nearly, not quite Easter time, I think it was, and I started telling people about the Lord and what God had done, and then what it did for my husband, and what he's done for my children, and what he's done for everything for me. But I was on fire for the Lord, and I just...
And so you've had no symptoms,
nothing. Nothing. Look, I run, I talk, as you can hear.
There's plenty of that goes on, I know. I've experienced it.
But, just so much. And we've got a business, that is...
That's just such an amazing thing. After they, they obviously put you back in intensive care, etc., did you have to do checkups or anything?
Well, the thing is, the doctor, when I went into intensive care, doctors come around to each table and say, oh, dead serious face, oh, she's got this, she's got that, she's got this. And then they got to me and this doctor said, you shouldn't even be here. You're too happy. I said, I know. I said, the Lord just healed me, And so then hence I've come out of hospital, but on a wrong medication.
Yeah.
And that was terrible because I couldn't even get out of a chair. And I kept saying something's wrong. And anyway, praying, Lord, help me here. And so, they found that they'd put me on the wrong medication. But they say today, as I am now, and that's, so many years.
So how many years ago was the stroke?
2012, so
Yeah.
it's 6 years now.
Yeah.
That I'm still a sick girl. They say that my heart, they don't know what to do with me because they've never seen this before, and yet they say, well, you're sick, you've got to take it easy and lie down and don't do anything. But I don't, as Chris and I said.
You're a pretty hardworking person.
I am a hardworking person.
There's no slowing you down.
No, that's right. And Chris and I went away, to New Zealand, and we had a fantastic time. And, you wouldn't stop me from doing anything because it's the Lord that's doing everything in my life, He's changed me.
Can I just tag Jenny's a bit?
Tag Jenny, sure.
Because another amazing thing to me was that Peter was in that plane for about an hour with a lot of open wounds, and amazingly enough, he survived just that alone, And then Jenny, the only way she could recognise him was a mole on his leg. He was so...
Is that right?
He was so out of... everything swells.
Yeah.
And the other amazing thing, while this dear sister in the Lord has Peter in hospital in Brisbane, number 2 son decides going motorbike racing or cross country, and he ended up in hospital
in Toowoomba. So Peter's in the Brisbane hospital. In intensive care. Philip, he'd punctured a spleen and a kidney, so he's in the Toowoomba hospital. And then my other son, Brian, decided to play tennis and throw a ball over the fence. Instead of going through the gate, climbed the fence and broke his arm, and he was in the Dalby hospital. So I had 3 people of my family members in the hospital at the same time, And
Can I just say, I'm really glad I'm not part of your family. I'm part of your spiritual family.
That's right. But see, we've always changed, like Chris and I, we've always made our family members live life to the fullest and enjoy life. Don't sit down and be on a computer these days, that there's so much out there, but to have the Lord in your life, that's what makes all the difference. Mm-hmm.
Pretty phenomenal story, isn't it? I just love Jenny's absolute faith that God will work in her life, regardless of what the circumstances might look like at the time. And that's a promise that we're given when we read in His Word. Don't miss part 2 of this interview by making sure you are subscribed using your favourite podcast app. We're available on lots of different apps like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, etc. You can also find all of the episodes on www.revivalontheairtoday.com. Would you like God to be real, alive and working in your life just like in Jenny's? Well, then head over to our website www.therevivalfellowship.com to find out what the Bible says about how to make this happen. Or send me an email, podcast@revivalontheairtoday.com, and we can chat on the email or on the phone. Until next time, God bless.